So now, before we get into the main part of the meditation, if you're comfortable with the idea of having a positive motivation for being here and doing meditation and so on, then one way to do that would be to bring into your mind the thought, may this meditation and whatever we're doing here this evening be beneficial to me, but also to others, to the world. May it bring more peace and happiness and help to relieve suffering and problems. So that's just one suggestion, but if you have your own ideas about how to generate positive motivation, you can use those. So now, for the body scan, I'm going to ask you to go through your body. I'll mention different parts of the body, starting from the top of your head, going down. Just do the best you can to stay focused and to feel whatever sensations you might have at those places that I mentioned. Just be aware, pay attention to what's happening in your body, as well as any thoughts or emotions that might arise. And try not to get caught up in or attached to any of the experiences that arise, because actually they're all just transitory, momentary experiences. They come and they go like clouds in the sky, or like bubbles coming up from a bottle of Coca-Cola. So all these experiences just arise and pass. So just be aware of them, but don't cling to any of them. And also try not to have any attitudes of aversion or fear, rejection, judging. Just try to have a very open, curious attitude, like an explorer, exploring your body and your mind, just to see what's there. So whatever you notice, just notice it and then let it go and move on to the next. So start with the top of your head. Feel the top of your head, whatever sensations there are there. And then let your awareness move down into your forehead. Feel your forehead. Then your eyes. Feel the muscles around your eyes, behind your eyes. And then feel the rest of your face. There's many muscles in my face. Just see if you can notice those many muscles and what's happening with them. Then move your awareness to the right side of your head and feel whatever sensations you may have there. Then continue moving your awareness around to the back of your head. And then to the left side of your head. And then see if you can go inside of your head. See if you can notice any sensations inside your head, in your brain, in your skull. And then let your awareness move down into your neck and throat. Then into your upper back. And then let your awareness continue traveling down through your back, from the upper part to the middle part. Then the lower part of the back. And then shift your awareness to the front part of your body, starting with your chest. So feel whatever sensations you may have in your chest, and that includes inside the body, the various organs, like the lungs, heart. Just notice whatever feelings or sensations you have in that area. Then let the awareness continue moving downwards through your torso, into your abdominal area. Again, feeling whatever sensations there are in the various organs, in your stomach, abdomen, the digestive system, and so on. And then let your awareness move down into the pelvic area, the various organs in that area, as well as your hips and buttocks. Then let your awareness start to move down into your right leg. First your thigh, the upper part of the leg. And then the knee. And then the calf, the lower part of the leg. And the ankle. And then finally your foot. Feeling the top part of the foot. And the bottom part, the sole of the foot. And finding your toes. Then shift your awareness to your left leg, starting with the upper part of the leg. And then let your awareness move down from there into your knee. Then the lower part of the leg, the calf. Then the ankle. And your foot. First feel the upper part of the foot. Then the lower part, the sole of the foot. And finally your toes. So now what we have left is our arms. So let's start with the right arm. Bring your awareness to the top of the right arm, where the shoulder and the arm meet. And then let your awareness move down slowly, first to the upper part of your right arm. Then the elbow. Then the lower part of the arm. And go through wrist, hands, and fingers. And then move your awareness to the left arm, starting at the top. And let your awareness travel down through your arm. From the upper part to the elbow. And the lower part of the arm. And your wrist, hand, and fingers. So now we'll focus our awareness on our breathing. So there are different ways that you can do this. One is to pay attention at the nostrils, where you can feel a subtle sensation as the breath is passing in and out of the nostrils. So either around the openings of the nostrils or on the upper lip. Even if you can't actually feel the sensation, just try to keep your attention, your awareness at that place. So that's one place where people often focus on the breathing. Another is at the abdomen, which is moving in and out with each breath. So we can pay attention to that in and out movement sensations. But you can also find another way of paying attention to the breath. The Buddha himself didn't specify how to pay attention to the breath. He simply said to watch it, to pay attention to it, to be aware of each breath coming in and going out. He also advised to be aware if the breath is a long breath or a short breath, shallow or deep. So that's the point. The point is simply to be aware of the breath and bring your mind awareness back to the breath. When it wanders away, if it gets caught up thinking about something else, or paying attention to sounds outside, any other object besides the breath, you notice that that's there. You notice that your mind is paying attention to some other object, there's some other thought or memory coming up. So you notice that, you don't ignore it, you don't pretend it's not there. You pay attention, you notice it, but then you don't get caught up in it, or you try not to. Instead, you let it go and come back to the breath. One thing that can be helpful is to make mental notes as to these other experiences that arise. So you can just make a mental note of thought, or thinking, or hearing a sound, or whatever it is. Just make a mental note of it, and then do your best to let it go and go back to the breath. And letting it go can be done more easily if we understand that all these other experiences are transitory. They come and they go, like clouds coming and going in the sky. None of the experiences that occur in our mind is permanent, fixed, always there, frozen. It's just like a cloud that comes and goes in the sky, or like a bubble, or like a wave on the surface of the ocean. Something that arises, it lasts a short time, and then it passes. So if you can understand that, remember that, then it becomes easier to let go of those other experiences and return your attention to the breathing. And another thing that might be helpful if you want to try it is to count your breaths. This is optional, but it can be helpful. So you count each breath as one, count up to 5 breaths, or up to 10 or 20 as you wish, and then come back to 1 whenever you reach your number. Did you find it helpful having the body scan first at the beginning of the session? Did that help? I find it helpful too. So if you did find that helpful and you want to try to practice meditation on your own, then you might try to do that. You don't have to spend a lot of time. You could just, even in a couple of minutes, just kind of quickly go through your body. So how much time you practice meditation, if you want to do it on your own, really varies. There's no fixed amount of time that everybody should do. So it depends on you and your ability. It also depends on your schedule, of course, how busy you are. So even if you just have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then that's enough time to do some meditation. If you can do more, of course, that's also good. But even just a short period of time is helpful. And there's a really wonderful book called Buddha's Brain. Does anyone come across that? Buddha's Brain. So, it's written by an American man who's he's both a neuropsychologist as well as meditation. He's a practitioner and also a teacher of meditation, mostly in the Vipassana tradition. His name is Rick Hansen. And so in that book, he's talking about meditation and the Buddhist path in terms of our brain and our physiology. And I usually don't understand very much about that kind of thing when they start talking about the brain, but he makes it really, really simple. And one of the things I found interesting, you may have heard this as well, they say we have these two different nervous systems. There's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. So the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight response. That's when we're stressed. And it said that nowadays most people are stressed more than they should be. We're in a stress state of mind more than we should be. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. It's the rest and digest system. So it's when we're calm and relaxed, and we need to be in that state more of the time than we are. And there's a few relatively simple ways of activating this parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. And one is to pay attention to sensations in the body. So like what we were doing in the beginning, the body scan. Just putting your awareness, your attention on sensations in your body, what's happening in your body. So even just doing that for a short time will have the effect of calming you down. And another one is breathing, deep breathing. Mainly exhalation. So breathing in deep and then exhaling, not quickly, but slowly. Breathing out very slowly, a very long, slow exhalation. That also has an effect of activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And you can do that within just 1 or 2 or 3 breaths. So if you're ever feeling stressed, really stressed, and you don't have a lot of time, you can't just sit down and meditate. Just take a few deep breaths and breathe out slowly. I found this really helpful. Last year I was living in Israel, and I had a car that I was using, so sometimes I was driving around, and that's really stressful. Driving in Israel, especially on the freeways, is quite stressful. So there were times when I really thought I was about to have a panic attack, and I would try this, I'd just sit there, because I could do it while I was driving. Breathing in and out a few times, and it really helped to calm down. So I recommend that anytime you're feeling stressed. It's a really helpful thing. But also just paying attention to the breath. So that's what we're doing in the breathing meditation. Just paying attention to the breath, coming in and going out, coming in and going out. That also has that effect of bringing about a calmer, more peaceful state of mind. So that's why, like I say, even if you just have 5 minutes or even less, even 1 minute, you can get yourself more relaxed, more calm, more peaceful by using one of these methods. Paying attention to your sensations in your body, taking a few deep breaths, or more if you have more time, and doing some meditation breath. Any questions?
I was sitting there having this feeling that I was not really able to concentrate 100% on the breath. I was trying to focus all my attention on the breath, but it seems like there's always this stream of gossip in a chatter going on. And to be honest, it's more like a little more focus on the breath and a little more focus on the inner chatter. I'm sort of trying to get more on the breath and less on the inner chatter. Is that sort of the right way to go?
Yeah, I think it's quite normal that you're not able to stay 100% on the breath. Realistically, one needs to put a lot of time and effort into meditation to be able to get to that point. And also the lifestyle we live, running around, driving, talking on the phone, looking at the internet, talking to people, working. Having a busy lifestyle naturally creates a lot of inner activity, mental activity. So then, especially at the end of the day, I always find it easier to meditate in the morning, first thing in the morning. My mind is relatively more calm and quiet then. But at the end of the day, after doing so many things during the day, naturally there's a lot of things going on in the mind. So it's very hard to just stay 100% on the breath. So the point is to just try to do that. But of course, understand that other things will be coming up. And when they do come up, just try to let go of them and come back to the breath whenever you can. So that's, I think, all that we can hope for or expect from ourselves, from our practice. Unless you're able to go into a retreat situation and just spend, hours every day doing nothing but meditation, then your mind can get much more calm and focused on the breath. But in this life that we're living, very hard to do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So don't be surprised or feel bad or feel worried if you're not able to do that. So one teacher said, it's good to have the idea that it's okay to keep starting again. You know, sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves. We're on the breath for a little while, and then it, mind goes off, and then we come back to the breath. And we find we have to keep doing that again, and we may get frustrated. Why can't I just stay with the breath? As if there's something wrong with that. But it's not. It's actually completely okay to have to keep coming back to the breath, to start over again and again and again. That's completely okay. So it's important to feel that way and try not to get frustrated and unhappy with yourself, and then start judging yourself or having thoughts like, oh, I can't do this, I'm not a good meditator, what's wrong with me, that kind of stuff. And of course, if that comes up, then that's part of what's happening. But try not to, give energy to those thoughts. Understand those are just thoughts. Just notice them and let them go, and just keep coming back. And it's okay to keep coming back to the breath again and again and again. So, patience in Buddhism, patience is a very important quality to have. Being patient with ourselves, being patient with others, being patient with how much time it takes to learn how to meditate. Very, very important. Okay, how about if we have a break now for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I actually have a slideshow tonight. Last week I was talking about the Four Noble Truths, and tonight I'll focus on the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path, and just give an overview of the path that leads to peace and happiness. Because it's a little complicated, I thought it'd be easier if I have slides you can look at. Okay, so have a break, and I'll ring the gong when it's time to come back again. If you're new here, there's tea, coffee, refreshments upstairs.
How long was meditation?
Well, from the time you stop the body scan, it was about 20 minutes. The body scan was
Because I usually meditate.
it was too long for you.
I was wondering how much longer it was.
Only 5 minutes. I see. This has this. Maybe this one. I did it once before. Ooh. Yes, this is it. So this thing has to come out. It's just a little cover. Sleepy.
Thank you for tonight.
Thank you. Bye bye.
So it's not receiving anything. This is computer tool. Should be computer tool. That was from what I had on my computer. Oh, the signal here. Thanks for doing. It's good. Then we can really. Oops, nice.
So in the last talk last week, I spoke about the Buddha's first teaching after his enlightenment, and in that teaching he explained the Four Noble Truths, which is in a way a little formula that can encapsulate the essence of all his teachings. And in that first teaching, after his enlightenment, he also explained the path that leads out of suffering and to nirvana, to liberation, to freedom from suffering. So he explained it in terms of 8 steps. This is called the Eightfold Path. And because it's a little complicated and trying to keep all this information in mind, I thought it would be helpful to put slides up so you can see these things. Now, this isn't explained so much in the Tibetan tradition, at least in the early stages. It does come when you study the more classical Indian texts, but for beginners it isn't taught very much, but it's very much emphasized in the Theravada tradition, Southeast Asia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, talk a lot about the Eightfold Path and how to practice it and so on. And it is a useful way of getting an idea of what it is we need to do if we want to become free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And even if we can't practice all 8 of these, then we just do what we can, as much of them as we can. So just briefly, what I'm going to do is just briefly go through the 8 now and then explain another way of summarizing them into 3 categories, 3 points, which are called the 3 trainings. So the first one is right understanding or right view, and this has to do with how we understand things. The Buddha gave a lot of teachings. Most of his teachings are explanations of how to transform ourselves, how to transform our mind, how to follow this path away from suffering to peace, to nirvana, to enlightenment. And just as if we want to make a journey, we want to go someplace like India or Bali or Australia, before setting out on this journey, it's important to understand where it is you're going, how to get there, what you need for the journey. Do you need a visa? Do you need shots? Do you need this and that? So you have to do some study, do some research, and have a good understanding of where you're going and how to get there. So that's one way of understanding this first noble truth, is the right understanding, the right view. You know, where are we? Where do we want to get to? How do we get there? And so on. And then right thought. So this has to do with our thoughts. You know, what kind of thoughts go on in our minds. Some are more positive, some are more negative, some are helpful, some are harmful or disturbing. So when this term right comes here, it's better not to think in terms of right and wrong or good and bad. It's not so much that the Buddha laid down a bunch of rules that we're supposed to follow, and if we do this, we're right, and if we do that, we're wrong. Rather, sometimes the Buddha is compared to a doctor, or we could say a scientist, who has an understanding of, let's say, food. You know, there's certain types of food that are healthy and nourishing, good for us. They'll make us healthy and strong, and let us live a long time. And other kinds of food are not so good for us and may even be poisonous. Like, for example, mushrooms, right? There's lots of different kinds of mushrooms, and some mushrooms are good for us. We can eat them, they're delicious and they're healthy. But some mushrooms are poisonous. They can make us sick or even die. So we need to know which are the right kinds of mushrooms to eat and which are the wrong ones to avoid. So it's more like that. And here, the Buddha is talking about what are the right things to do if we want to have happiness and peace and avoid suffering. He's just trying to set us in the right direction and doing the right things that will bring the right results. Okay, and then right speech, number 3, has to do with our speech. What kind of verbal activities we engage in that are helpful, as opposed to those that are harmful. That's the basis when it says right. It's those things that bring about happiness and peace, benefit for ourselves and also for others. We try to stick with those and try to avoid the ones that make suffering, create more suffering for ourselves and others. Right action. I'm going to go through these one by one later. I'm just introducing the whole list to begin with. Then right action has to do with our bodily actions. Right livelihood has to do with what we do to make a living. Right, most people have a job. So there's certain types of jobs or livelihoods or ways of making a living that are more helpful and beneficial, and others that are harmful. Right effort has to do with what we put our energy into, how we put our energy. Right mindfulness has to do with practice of mindfulness, paying attention to what's going on moment by moment. And then right meditation or concentration has to do with learning how to keep our mind focused, concentrated. So this is the order that the Buddha mentioned when he gave his first teaching. However, when it comes to practicing them, like an ordinary person putting these into practice, this order may not be the most helpful one, the most practical one. So there is another way of looking at them that is in terms of, like I say, these three categories, which I'll introduce in the next slide. These are called the three trainings. And this is a kind of simplified way of explaining the Eightfold Path. The first of the three trainings is ethics, or morality. And in Buddhism, ethics is based on compassion. It's based on understanding that nobody wants to suffer. Nobody likes suffering. Animals, insects, humans, of course, don't like suffering. We always try to avoid suffering. We suffer when we are harmed or hurt, killed or something. So understanding and accepting that nobody wants to suffer, we try to live our life in a way that we don't make suffering. We don't cause suffering to others and to ourselves. So that's the basis of ethics. It's behaving in non-harmful, non-aggressive ways, and instead ways that may create peace, harmony, happiness, benefit for ourselves and others. So that's basically what ethics is about in Buddhism. And then the second of the three trainings is concentration. That has more to do with our mind, learning how to develop concentration, meditation. And then the third one is wisdom. Now, in fact, this third training is the most important one, because if you remember last week when I spoke about the Four Noble Truths, the first truth is suffering, second is the cause of suffering. In Buddhism, the cause of suffering is mainly our what we sometimes call delusions or afflictive emotions, disturbing emotions. These are factors within our mind, like hatred, anger, greed, jealousy, ignorance. So there's these factors within our mind that are unhealthy, unrealistic, and those are the main cause of suffering. Those motivate us to act in ways that harm ourselves, harm others, harm the world. And so those are the things that we need to free ourselves from if we really want to be free of suffering. So what it is that enables us to be free of these delusions, these causes of suffering, is wisdom. Wisdom is seeing things as they are, seeing the reality of things. And that's directly opposite to ignorance, which is seeing things in an unrealistic way. So wisdom and ignorance are like opposites. So as long as our mind is under the influence of ignorance, we have suffering. So what we need is to have wisdom. So wisdom kind of knocks out our ignorance. So that's actually the most important thing we need to develop. However, it's not easy to develop because it takes a very sharp, clear, focused state of mind. So they say we have to develop concentration, we have to develop the ability to keep our mind focused in meditation so that we can develop wisdom. And then in turn, concentration is also not very easy. And to be able to develop concentration, we need ethics and morality. Because the way we live our life, what we do in our ordinary life, will affect our mind when we try to meditate. You can understand that if you just think about what would happen if, let's say, you get into an argument with somebody, you lose your temper, you get angry, you say all kinds of bad things to this person, and you're in this really agitated state of mind. And then shortly after that, you sit down and try to meditate. So will you be successful in keeping your mind focused on your breathing? So I think it's easy to see that how we behave in our life will affect what happens in our mind when we try to meditate, whether we're able to concentrate or not. And then that in turn will affect our ability to develop wisdom. So they say that these three things are kind of step by step. We need ethics as the basis, the foundation. On top of that, we can cultivate concentration, and then on top of that, we can cultivate wisdom. But we can still be practicing all three at the same time. It doesn't mean you have to perfect the first one before you can go on to the next. So, but just the point is we need all three. We can't skip any of them if we really want to get going on the path. Okay, so those are the three trainings. And the word training, I think, is significant because it means just like an athlete is training, they're working on their body, they're working on their skill, their sport, whatever it is, and they have to spend a lot of time working on those. It doesn't mean right from the beginning they're able to do it perfectly. So in the same way, we can't practice these three things perfectly from the beginning, but we learn and we train and we get better over time. And the more we do it, the better we get at these three. Okay, so now we're going to look at how the Eightfold Path fits into the three trainings. So under ethics, we have right speech, right action, right livelihood. Under concentration, we have right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Those are the last three on the list. And then for wisdom, we have right understanding and right thought. So now we're going to go through these one by one. And like I said, I think this is a good way of looking at the Eightfold Path because I think it's more in terms of practicality. It's easier to start with ethics. It's easier to work on our speech, our actions, our livelihood than it is to work on training our concentration, for example, which, in turn is easier than wisdom. So I think this is the order in which they're more easy, starting from the easier to the more difficult. Okay, so under the training of ethics, we have right speech, and right speech means trying to refrain from wrong forms of speech, which are lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and gossip. So I think lying is, I think everybody understands. Divisive speech, that's when we talk in ways that cause division. Like if there are two people who are friends with each other and we say bad things about the other one to one, and then they become unfriends. They become angry at each other. So it could be between two people, but also on a bigger level, it could be between two groups of people or two countries. This is often what happens in the world. One side says all these bad things about the other side and stirs up all this hatred, and then they just become enemies and sometimes even go to war, killing each other. So a lot of this is dependent on the kind of speech that people are using. And then harsh speech, the third one, that's when we say hurtful things like nasty words, insulting words, critical words, words that hurt people's feelings. And then idle talk. I prefer idle talk. Sometimes it's called gossip, but the term gossip usually is like talking about other people, telling stories. Oh, so-and-so is doing this, and so-and-so broke up with that person, and now it's with that person. But idle talk is more than just that. It can also include talking about politics, for example, or clothing, or music. Now you might think, well, what's wrong with that? It can be harmful because it can stir up attachment, make us have more attachment, more desire, and also can stir up anger or hatred. When you tell stories about people, then that can cause people to have bad thoughts and bad feelings about others, aversion for others, and so on. So it can increase our delusions, our disturbing emotions. Another problem is that it's not such a useful way of spending our time. We can spend a lot of time doing this, whereas that time could be better spent doing other things. Does that make sense? You know, there are things we could do that are more useful, more constructive, more beneficial. Now, this isn't to say we shouldn't talk at all, but we just need to be careful about what we're talking about and how we're talking about it, and so on. And sometimes people say, well, if we stop these 4 types of speech, what's left to talk about? What is there to talk about? But I think the Dalai Lama is a good example. You know, he talks a lot, but I think his speech is quite nice. You know, it's positive and constructive, joyful, fun. You know, I mean, he clearly has a lot of fun. This is with Desmond Tutu. Apparently, the 2 of them are great friends, and they joke with each other, tease each other, and so on. So giving up these forms of speech doesn't mean, you know, there's nothing to talk about and we can't have fun, we can't enjoy ourselves. It just means we try to be careful about how we speak and try to make sure that our speech is positive and beneficial and doesn't bring about more suffering and more delusions in ourselves and in others. Okay, the second of the Eightfold Path that fits under ethics is right action. And this means refraining from killing, stealing, and unwise sexual behavior. So those are 3 forms of action that are, this is talking about physical actions. These cause suffering. I think killing is pretty clear. And stealing. People value their possessions and are hurt if they're taken away. Now, unwise sexual behavior, in a very general way, would be sexual behavior that causes suffering. So it could be physical, you know, physically harming somebody, or rape, of course, child abuse. But it usually also includes what's called adultery. That's when there's, you know, 2 people are in a relationship, and if you get involved with one and the other person is left out, then that causes suffering, causes mental suffering. The person who's being cheated on will be very hurt by what's going on, and it can also lead to lying and dishonesty, cheating, and so on. So any kind of sexual behavior that causes suffering is unwise. So we try to refrain from these, and then we try to do the opposite, like cherishing life and giving and just trying to make sure our action with body and speech are beneficial to others, not just humans, but also animals. I mean, most people, I think, take care of birds and cats and dogs and so on. But anyway, so living our life in that way, that we're aware of other beings around us and really try to not harm them with our physical actions or physical body, and instead try to help them, try to take care of them as much as we can. That's what's involved with right action. Okay, right livelihood, this has to do with what we do to make a living. And the Buddha specifically mentioned certain things we should try to avoid, like dealing with weapons, selling guns and knives and nuclear weapons and so on. Animals for slaughter, like, you know, selling pigs and cows to slaughterhouses where they're going to be killed. Slavery, there's still some of that in the world today, apparently in some countries in Africa. They still have slavery. And also some forms of prostitution. That's sometimes slavery. Young girls, young women are really like slaves of their whoever it is that's in charge of them, and they're not free to do what they want. So doing anything that perpetuates, that supports and perpetuates these kinds of activities. And selling intoxicants as well. This might be controversial, especially in Europe, because people drink a lot. But then drinking alcohol can lead to lots of problems. When people become drunk, then they can lose control of what they're doing, and sometimes if they drive under the influence of alcohol, then it can cause death or injury. And also just becoming an alcoholic, that can lead to a lot of suffering, both for the person themselves, their family, their friends. They can lose their jobs. So because of the various problems that can come from intoxicants, alcohol, drugs, and so forth, then the Buddha said it's better not to produce these and sell these. And poison. So something harmful. So those are the things specifically mentioned by the Buddha, but I think we can expand that and think of any kind of business that leads to suffering for other people or beings, like animals. Try to avoid those if possible, and instead do things that promote health and well-being and happiness for others, like medical profession, psychology, social work. There's lots of ways we can make a living that are beneficial, not harmful. So we try to do those as much as we can. Then, okay, so that's for the first of the three trainings, ethics, and we have three of the Eightfold Path that fit into that. So the second of the three trainings is concentration. And again, we have three of the Eightfold Path included in this. One is right effort. So right effort has to do with where we put our energy, into. And just in a general way, we could say that right effort is to put our energy into doing things that are helpful and skillful and bringing peace and happiness and benefit, but also our spiritual practice, following the spiritual path, putting our effort into that. But the Buddha also mentions specific things about effort, mainly with regard to our mind. So trying to prevent delusions arising. Delusions are things like anger, greed, hatred, jealousy, and so on. Things that disturb our mind and can lead to problems for ourselves and others. So try to prevent these from arising in our mind to begin with. And then if they have arisen already, to try to work on them, subdue them. Or we have lots of different antidotes that we can use when delusions do arise. Like if anger arises, we can work on developing patience, love, compassion. These are like antidotes to anger and hatred. And then cultivating positive states of mind that haven't yet arisen, like trying to cultivate love and compassion, equanimity, joy, and wisdom, and so forth. So trying to grow these in our mind, just as we grow flowers and vegetables in our garden. And then those that have arisen, once they have arisen in our mind, once we have been able to develop love and compassion, trying to maintain them so that they don't get lost. Keep them as much as we can. And not just at times of meditation, but in our daily life. So it's good to try to keep our awareness going during our day. And when you notice somebody in need of help, I thought this picture was really touching. Somebody is in need of help, taking care of them, doing what you can to help them. So what we learn when we're studying and meditating, ideally we should try to not just leave that on the cushion when we get up and walk away, but bring it with us and try to keep it going in our life. Even doing little things, paying attention to people around us, animals, insects, and so on, doing what we can to bring our compassion and love and wisdom into them. Okay, then the second of the Eightfold Path under concentration is mindfulness. And there's different ways of explaining mindfulness. It can actually have different meanings. The word mindfulness in Pali language is sati, and in Sanskrit it's smriti. And this actually, it's the same word as memory. The same word as memory or remembering. So mindfulness just means remembering or keeping in mind. And one way that the term mindfulness is used is that we need to keep in mind whatever we've learned, like the Buddhist teachings and practices and so forth. Also, if we take vows, there's this tradition of taking vows. Both monks and nuns can take vows. Lay people can also take vows, like the vow to not kill. So if you've taken a vow, you have to remember that. You have to keep that in mind and not forget it, so that there's mosquito lands on your arm, you don't just mindlessly smash it. So we have to keep in mind what we've learned, what we've committed ourselves to, what we are trying to do, following the path, and not forget those things. But the more general way of understanding mindfulness is, like in a popular sense, the secular sense, is just being aware of what's happening moment by moment. And in the Buddhist teachings, he taught mindfulness with regard to 4 objects. Our body, what's happening in our body, what our body's doing, and so on. Our feelings. Now, when we use the term feelings in Buddhism, it's usually not in the sense of all the different kinds of emotions that we have, but in a more specific sense, 3 types of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And it said that every moment, one of those 3 feelings is present in our mind. We feel pleasure, a pleasant feeling, we have unpleasant feeling, we have neutral feeling. So those are always present. One of those is always present every moment. And it's important to be aware of those, because if we're not careful, an unpleasant feeling can lead to aversion, hatred, anger, and maybe become aggressive and harmful. A pleasant feeling can lead to attachment, desire, craving, and that leads to another kind of behavior. And then a neutral feeling usually perpetuates our ignorance. So there's a connection between these 3 types of feelings and the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. So the idea is to be aware of our feelings, not to stop them. The idea isn't to stop having feelings, but just to be careful when we do have feelings that they don't develop into more unhealthy states of mind that can lead to suffering for ourselves and others. And then the 3rd object is the mind, just all the other aspects of our minds, all our thoughts and so on. And then phenomena, all the things in the world around us. So there's a sutra called the Satipatthana Sutra, very, very famous sutra, especially in the Theravada tradition, Southeast Asia, where the Buddha taught how to practice mindfulness with regard to these 4 objects. And there are people who are practicing this all day long, like, 24 hours a day they're practicing being mindful of these 4 things. When you're sitting, when you're walking, when you're eating, no matter what you're doing, you practice mindfulness. And the real purpose of practicing mindfulness is to develop wisdom, to develop the wisdom that sees things as they are and, stops seeing things in an unrealistic way. For example, impermanence. That's the first thing we need to look out for, is how things are momentary, impermanent, changing all the time. So that's just the reality of things. But we tend not to see it. We tend to see things as if they don't change, as if they stay the same. And then that becomes the basis for clinging, attachment, grasping, also anger, aversion, hatred. So seeing how everything is actually fluid and changing, not static and concrete, really helps a lot to undercut our disturbing emotions. This is something we can see through practicing mindfulness of these four objects. Okay, so then there's right concentration. This is one of the, again, eightfold path. And this involves training our mind to stay focused on one object for longer and longer periods of time. So that's basically what concentration is all about. And when one does develop the ability to stay concentrated, one can achieve the state which is called shamatha, calm abiding. And this is, they say the sign of having achieved this state is that you're able to stay focused on your object of meditation, whether it's the breath or whatever it is, for at least 4 hours. That's the minimum, without any distraction, without your mind wandering away or getting sleepy, falling asleep. It's like very sharp, focused, concentrated state of mind, and you feel physically and mentally blissful. You're just like totally blissed out. You can just sit there. You can even sit there for hours longer than that. So this is what can be achieved. It's not an end in itself. It's more like a tool. Having this ability to stay focused is like a tool to be able to go out and develop wisdom. But it's said to be a really, really blissful experience when you do achieve it. And then another main type of meditation is vipassana, or insight. And that is the main type of practice for developing wisdom. So calm abiding, concentration alone will not lead to wisdom. We need to have vipassana, or insight, and that we achieve by doing some analysis. That's how it's explained in the Tibetan tradition. We need to analyze how things exist to be able to see their real nature. And everybody can meditate, even kids. There are various projects in some schools, for example, teaching children to meditate. And apparently they're able to do it. Not very long, but they can do it. And I came across a quotation where the Dalai Lama said, if we could teach all the children in the world to practice mindfulness, meditation, then we'd get rid of all the wars and violence and everything would stop. That would be great. Okay, so now the third of the three trainings is wisdom. And we have two of the Eightfold Path. One is called right understanding. This basically means knowing what is right or wrong. And again, right and wrong isn't like good and bad, but it's more what is correct, what is true, what is beneficial, as opposed to what is unwise, incorrect, leads to suffering, leads to confusion, and so forth. And so we can develop right understanding in two ways. One is knowledge, just like studying. Studying is very important in Buddhism, learning what is the way that things exist. And then a further development is realization. So realization, knowledge is more like intellectual understanding, like we know things intellectually, but realization is when it actually penetrates to our heart, to our experience. It becomes part of us. It becomes our way of being, transformed by the knowledge that we have. And so, most of these Buddhist traditions, there's this practice of study, learning what the Buddha taught, and but not just leaving it at an intellectual level, going beyond that and realizing it. So in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about a kind of 3-step process. The first is, they call it listening to teachings, but that can also include reading, studying on our own, so to gain the knowledge. The second step is reflecting or thinking. That's when we think about what we've learned to have a better understanding of it. And the third step is meditation. That's when we really sit down and focus on this material, this information, and try to absorb it, bring about a deeper and deeper understanding of it so that it becomes our actual experience. And then the last of the eightfold is right thought. And this has to do with our mind, our thinking, trying to generate positive ways of thinking, positive thoughts, loving kindness, compassion, and so on. And trying our best to avoid negative thoughts, anger, hatred, thoughts of harming others, and so forth. Of course, it's hard. They say with our, they call it 3 doors. There are 3 doors through which we do actions. One is our body, second is our speech, and third is our mind. So it's easier to work on the level of the body. Like we can stop ourselves from killing. It's not too difficult, is it? It's very rare for someone to commit a murder. So we can stop, even when we feel like it sometimes, we can stop ourselves from doing that. So that's not too difficult. It's a little harder to work on our speech. Sometimes we just find ourselves, saying really hurtful things. So that's a little bit more difficult, but still easier than the mind. Trying to stop our mind from having hateful thoughts or really, really negative thoughts, that's much more difficult. So that's why they say, start with your body and your speech. Try to work on that level and refrain from doing harmful things. And the more you do that, then the easier it will become to work on the mind and have more positive thoughts and avoid negative ones. But it's mainly a question of familiarity. And I think that this is supported by neuroscience, brain science. That it is, they talk about brain plasticity? Neuroplasticity, right. So they used to believe that the brain was fixed, couldn't be changed, but now they discover that's not the case. The brain can be changed. And they've been doing a lot of experiments with meditators. First, they were experimenting with people practicing mindfulness, and recently they've been doing research on people meditating on compassion. And I find that there's definite signs of changes in the brain when people meditate on compassion and generate positive thoughts. So the more we work on this, the more we try to generate compassion and love and make ourselves familiar with those states of mind, then the more those states of mind will just come up naturally. They become a natural, kind of spontaneous way of being. And then the negative ones, anger and hatred and so on, will gradually decrease. There's this nice story Pema Chodron tells in one of her books. It's from the Native American tradition. You may have heard it about this old man, a grandfather, talking to his grandson. and saying that, you know, inside of every one of us, there are these two wolves that are battling each other, fighting each other. One is good wolf, one is a bad wolf. And the good wolf is our positive thoughts and feelings and attitudes and so on. The bad wolf is all our negative thoughts and feelings and so on. So these two are always fighting with each other. And the grandson said, so which one wins? And my grandfather says, the one that I feed. So we can work on it. We can work on our mind and our attitude. There's a lot of material in Buddhism on how to do this, but you know, lots of other spiritual traditions and psychology and so on. Positive psychology, for example, also have methods for how to work on our mind, our attitude, our thoughts, and have more positive ones and less negative ones. Okay, so that's just a really brief look. I'm going through these very quickly, but just to give you some idea of the Eightfold Path. And if any of this makes sense to you, and you feel that, yeah, I'd like to start working on that, you can start. That's why I say it's nice to think of it in terms of a step rather than having to do all of it at once. So we have a few minutes left. Any questions?
It seemed pretty clear the way you presented. But there are so many, like everyday life has so many, like, what is lying? When should I just tell the truth even if it's hurtful? Or sort of, we don't mean to kill, but we still eat meat sometimes. Even if we only eat vegetables, we're taking the food away from the insects. So there's so many dilemmas in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to understand it. It's a lot more difficult to put into practice. Like we need to live in some kind of way.
Yeah, well, that's one reason why study is very helpful, because there's a lot of material on ethics, for example, and going into all the details of, like, for example, the act of killing. Any of the acts that we do, but just to take killing as an example, there's different aspects of an act of killing or not killing. For example, the motivation, why are you doing it? How do you do it? Different ways that you could go about killing. Are you doing it intentionally or accidentally? How do you feel after doing it? So there's different factors, different facets. And so according to these different, like, permutations, the act can become more or less negative or more or less positive. So, like you mentioned, lying, telling lies. This is often a question that comes up. People ask, well, does that mean I always have to tell the truth, even if it's going to cause problems or suffering? No, is that what it means? So usually it's said that we do have to bring wisdom in. We have to bring in our wisdom. And there's the classic example given in the text. If you're walking in the forest and a deer goes running by, and then a little while later a hunter comes along with a gun and asks you if you saw the deer. So do you tell the truth in that situation? Would that be the right thing to do? If you tell the truth, then you can lead to the deer being killed and the hunter creating the karma of killing. So is that really the wisest thing? So they say, no, that wouldn't be the wisest thing to do, to tell the truth. So you try to find some way around it. You don't have to tell an absolute lie, but you don't have to tell the absolute truth. That's the point. So that's just an example of how we have to understand these different points about right speech and so on. So wisdom is important to bring into it. Also compassion and love. Like one time somebody said to me, my girlfriend sometimes asks me, am I pretty? And if I tell her the truth, she'll be hurt. So, or somebody invites you over for a meal, they cook this meal and you start eating it and they say, how is it? Is it delicious? And maybe it's not, but to say that, to tell the truth, would be hurtful to someone. So you find some way around that. So they talk about skillful means. There's this other factor of skillful means, which I think of as a combination of wisdom and compassion and ethics. So we try to live ethically as much as we can, but also motivated by compassion and love, understanding others, their feelings, and trying our best to avoid hurting their feelings, but also wisdom, understanding maybe in a broader sense, in a bigger picture, what would be the most wise and skillful way to act in each situation. So I see it as a process of learning and growing, and like right from the beginning, we can't expect that we're going to never make a mistake and always do things right. But as you go along, you try and practice these various things, you kind of learn what is helpful and what isn't. Does that make sense? I don't think that, the Buddhist path is this hard and fast, really, really super strict. You have to do it like this all the time. But it's more like there's these general principles that were laid down by the Buddha. And then we have to look at ourselves and what our abilities are, what our capabilities are, and then just try to do our best. Just try to do the best we can. And if we make a mistake, well, sorry, apologize, wake up, and try to do better the next time. Is that helpful? Well, I think to stop now so I can catch my train. So let's turn this off. And what we normally do in meditations and classes and so on, at the end, we started in the beginning by trying to generate a positive motivation for being here. And then to end, we can take a few moments to mentally dedicate the positive energy we created by coming together, doing meditation, listening to and thinking about, learning about more of the Buddhist teachings. So these actions that we've done are positive or beneficial for ourselves. We've created some positive energy. And then we can share this positive energy with others. With kind of wish, prayer, and aspiration that this positive energy we've created will help to bring about more wisdom, compassion, love, and other positive qualities in other people in the world around us, and decrease anger, violence, war, and all the different kinds of suffering. And if you're comfortable with the idea, you can also dedicate the positive energy that it will help all of us get closer to enlightenment, which is the fulfillment of our highest potential. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.